Channel 6.3 and 126, Johnny Carson Show. Channel 7.2 and 123, Children and His Friends. Channel 15 and 11, Sources of 2 and a half men. Channel 26 and 12, George Baker. Channel 36 and 13, Nightly Business. Channel 42 and 10, Mike Gabelli. At 10:30, Channel 3 and 5, Stephen Colbert. Channel 6 and 8, The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon. Channel 7 and 9, Jimmy Fallon Live.
I think it could be 43. I didn't count all the way in.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know how many you have, but
Got a page full.
up there,
Not 43.
up there on the left-hand side, they got a box with all of them just right back.
Yeah, it's probably about 20.
Channel 6.3 and 126, Purposes of Divine Daughter. Channel 15 and 11, Purposes of Hot Cleveland. Channel 36 and 13, Doug Martin 7. Channels 42.2 and 121, The Whistleblower. At 11:30, Channel 3 and 5, Everybody's Still Looking Recorded. Channel 6 and 8, Seth Myers. Channel 7 and 9, ABC News 9.
Well, you want me to start it off?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Channel 15.3 and 129, Record Talk. Channel 26 and 12,
Myself some tissue, clean my glasses
Channel
off.
22 and 10, Mike Gabelli. At midnight, Channel 3.2 and 125, Arms and Bridges. Channel 6.2.
You don't need reading glasses.
I do. I've got contacts, bifocal contacts. So.
But Steve, that the alligator reads in here. He doesn't use his glasses, but he reads like this. So he must be extremely nearsighted.
You wonder why he doesn't use reading glasses.
He'd almost have to use reverse ones if he's bringing them that close in to read.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that brings us right up to the 6 o'clock hour, and that means it is a live reading for this lovely Tuesday evening that we are having. We have Steve Bodie, and we also have Jim Carlson. And those are your readers for tonight. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, are ready to read your Omaha World Herald and the New York Times. So, I am going to hand it on over to the two gentlemen, and they're going to get started on your live reading for you.
Thank you, Emily. Good evening, everyone. This is Jim Carlson. I'll be reading from the Omaha World Herald this evening.
And this is Steve Bodie. I'll be doing the New York Times.
Okay. I'm going to start with some news briefs from around the world and around the nation. Out of Indonesia, the Navy here said Monday it fired shots at a Chinese trawler when it refused to stop fishing in Indonesian waters. They then seized the vessel and its crew of 8. The trawler was intercepted in Indonesia's exclusive economic zone, which overlaps with the southernmost part of the hotly disputed South China Sea. The Navy said the trawler was hit, but no one was injured. About 24 hours after he was kidnapped, Mexican soccer star Alan Pulido found himself alone with one of his captors and saw his chance. He wrestled away the man's pistol and cell phone and dialed Mexico's emergency number. Within minutes, he was free early Monday. The kidnapping of the star player happened 1 week before elections for a new governor. Tamaulipas State, which borders Texas, has been by drug gang violence in recent years. Out of Brisbane, Australia, a 47-year-old woman struggled in vain to drag her friend out of a crocodile's jaws at a northeast Australian beach. The pair were in shallow water Sunday night in an area where crocodile spotting tours operate and warning signs are plentiful. The would-be rescuer was taken to a hospital in Mossman in shock and with an arm injury. You can't legislate against human stupidity, said Parliament member Warren Ensk. And out of Afghanistan, a string of Taliban attacks on police checkpoints in the increasingly volatile South killed at least 12 policemen, said a police officer Monday in Helmand province. 7 police were missing, presumably abducted. As the summer fighting season wears on, military officials expect combat to escalate because the new Taliban leader, chosen to replace the victim of a U.S. drone strike, needs to consolidate power. Out of Washington, the White House was briefly placed on lockdown Monday afternoon after someone threw a metal object over the north fence. The Secret Service did not identify the person, though witnesses saw a woman placed in handcuffs. It said a sweep of the grounds found nothing dangerous. Residents in rural southeast Texas braced for a record crest forecast by midday today on the Brazos River, in an area where 4 days of torrential rain and flooding has killed 6 people. Just 2 years after the river ran dry in places because of drought, the National Weather Service predicted it would reach 53.5 feet in Fort Bend County, which is 3 feet above the previous record and worse than in a 1994 flood that caused extensive damage. Crews were to resume searching today for more people thought to be missing in Travis County. 4 of the 6 dead were recovered in Washington County between Austin and Houston. About 40 people were rescued from late Sunday to Monday from homes in a low-lying neighborhood of Simontown. Flood warnings were in effect across Texas on Monday. Out of Newport Beach, thousands of Memorial Day beachgoers were kept out of the water Monday as lifeguards searched miles of popular Southern California shoreline for a shark that they think attacked a swimmer the day before. The victim, a woman swimming in a wetsuit, had bite marks on her torso and was bleeding heavily Sunday when a lifeguard spotted her about 100 yards offshore at Corona del Mar State Beach. She was reported conscious at a hospital, but her condition was not disclosed. Lifeguards and a police helicopter were searching the waters Monday. Out of Anchorage, a veterinarian pathologist worked Monday to determine what killed a juvenile fin whale discovered on the bow of a cruise ship entering an Alaskan port. The cause of the endangered whale's death was not immediately apparent. It was spotted Sunday on the bow of the Zan Dam just below the waterline as it prepared to dock in Seward. The carcass was towed to a beach where a veterinary pathologist did a necropsy as federal officers stood guard against bears. A spokeswoman said Holland American Line has a comprehensive program to avoid striking whales. Out of Clinton, North Carolina, authorities here say a man was shot to death by police after holding a shotgun for 20 minutes in a Burger King parking lot and telling officers he was not coming out of his pickup. Clinton police, summoned by a 911 call late Sunday, said on Monday that several officers fired at 53-year-old John Coffey when he pointed the weapon at officers.
And from the New York Times, U.S. struggles with goal of admitting 10,000 Syrians. President Obama invited a Syrian refugee to this year's State of the Union address, and he has spoken passionately about embracing refugees as a core American value. But nearly 8 months into an effort to resettle 10,000 Syrian refugees in the United States, Mr. Obama's administration has admitted just over 2,500. Administration prepares for a new round of deportations of Central Americans, including many women and children pleading for humanitarian protection. The president is facing intense criticism from allies in Congress and advocacy groups about his administration's treatment of migrants. They say Mr. Obama's lofty message about the need to welcome those who come to the United States seeking protection has not been matched by action. And they warn that the president, who will host a summit meeting on refugees in September during the United Nations General Assembly session, risks undercutting his influence on the issue at a time when American leadership is needed to counteract a backlash against refugees. Given that we've resettled so few refugees and we're employing a deterrence strategy to refugees on our southern border, I wouldn't think we'd be giving advice to any other nations about doing better, said Kevin Appleby, the Senior Director of International Migration Policy at the Center for Migration Studies of New York. The world notices when we talk a good game and then we don't follow through in our own backyard, Mr. Appleby said. The delay is frustrating Mr. Obama, who has made a point of speaking out against anti-immigrant sentiment, both in the United States and abroad, arguing that Republicans, particularly the party's presumptive presidential nominee Donald J. Trump, are playing on misplaced fears about terrorism. We've got to push back against anti-immigrant sentiment in all of its forms, especially by those who are trying to stoke it just to seek political gain, Mr. Obama told a gathering this month of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in Washington. At the White House, he has instructed his top advisors that they must not fall short of meeting his goal to admit 10,000 Syrian refugees to the United States by fall. But an onerous and complex web of security checks and vetting procedures shared among several government agencies has made that target difficult to reach. At the same time, White House officials concede that challenging election year politics surrounding the issue, 47 House Democrats joined Republicans November in voting for legislation to further tighten the screening process, making it impossible to quickly take in substantially more Syrians by removing any of the tough vetting procedures. Mr. Obama has been very clear that he expects us to find a way to make this happen consistent with other security standards. Amy Pope, a deputy Homeland Security advisor, said of reaching the target of 10,000 refugees. The dynamics within the Congress have certainly made it difficult to lean far forward in terms of a refugee processing, but our obligation is to leave the refugee process in better shape than we found it. The Central American migrants pouring across the southern border pose a different but no less challenging problem. Individuals who enter the United States illegally do not necessarily qualify as refugees, although a growing proportion of Central Americans are arriving with the claims of asylum, asserting that they are seeking refuge from violence and mortal threats in their home countries. While administration officials say they are working to address the root causes of the migration and to set up new programs to extend humanitarian protection to those who need it, their primary response has been to try to deter Central Americans from making the dangerous journey to the United States. One method has been to deport those whose asylum claims have been rejected. We have to control the border. That's our job. We have to honor our humanitarian obligations, Cecilia Munoz, the director of Mr. Obama's Domestic Policy Council, said in an interview. The situation in Central America, as terrible as it is, the legal standard may not be fully up to addressing why people are leaving. Humanitarian groups have denounced the administration's approach, arguing the president must recognize the Central American migrants as refugees. The administration's entire foreign policy has been built upon enforcement, not protection, said Anna Green, the director of policy and advocacy. United States programs for the International Rescue Committee, if this situation was playing out far from our borders, our government would be funding a humanitarian response and demanding that our countries abide by their international obligations.
All right. Cheers erupted Monday in a courtroom here as the former dictator of Chad, Hissène Habré, was convicted of crimes against humanity and sentenced to life in prison. It was a conviction 16 years in the making, pushed by human rights activists and the victim of Habré's 1982 to 1990 rule, a rare case of a former dictator being brought to justice. It also was the first trial of a former African ruler in another African country under the auspices of the African Union, perhaps a new model for justice on a continent that historically has suffered under despots immune from prosecution. This verdict sends a powerful message that the days when tyrants could brutalize their people pillage their treasury, and escape abroad to a life of luxury are coming to an end, said Reed Brody, a lawyer for Human Rights Watch, a nonprofit group that has pressed the case since the year 2000. Today will be carved into history as the day that a band of unrelenting survivors brought their dictator to justice. Habry's conviction signals that no leader is above the law and that no woman or girl is below it. This is the first time in history that a former head of state has been convicted in an international trial of personally committing rape. Habre, now age 73 and robed in white, appeared to accept the verdict calmly and was escorted out of the courtroom under heavy security. He pumped his fists in the air as supporters shouted and clapped. "Long live independent Africa," he shouted as his wife wept. His attorney promised an appeal. The trial is significant, especially because it took place in a court backed by the African Union, a 54-nation grouping establishment in 2001 with the hope of encouraging peace and good governance on the continent. Several African leaders view the International Criminal Court in The Hague, an alternative venue for such prosecutions, as biased against Africa, but that charge could not be leveled at Habry's trial. It was extremely important that he was convicted in Africa and not in his own country. It shows a strong desire in Africa to build Pan-African justice for war crimes, said Richard Moncrief of the International Crisis Group, a nonprofit that works to resolve international disputes. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry praised the Senegalese and Chadian governments, as well as the African Union, for setting up the tribunal. This ruling is a landmark in the global fight against impunity for atrocities. Let this be a message to other perpetrators, he said. Kerry also called the case an opportunity for the United States to reflect on and learn from our own connection with past events in Chad. Habry, once supported by the United States and France in his wars against Libyan Muammar Gaddafi, was accused of killing up to 40,000 of his own citizens and torturing hundreds of thousands. His secret police were ruthless in finding and torturing political opponents. He was overthrown by Chad's current president, Idriss Déby, in 1990. He then fled to Senegal, where he lived a life of luxury for years until a campaign by his victims prodded the Senegalese government to either try him or turn him over to an international court. After years of delays, Senegal, working with the African Union, set up the Extraordinary African Chambers, a special court using judges from across the continent. More than 90 witnesses testified, including torture victims, describing how their heads were squeezed by sticks, and women recounting stories of sexual slavery. Habry was convicted of responsibility for thousands of deaths and systematic torture.
Old and on the street, the graying of Americans homeless. They lean unsteadily on canes and walkers or roll along the sidewalks of Skid Row here in beat-up wheelchairs, past soil, sleeping bags, swaying tents, and piles of garbage. They wander the streets in tattered winter coats, even in the warmth of spring. They worry about the illnesses of age and how they will approach death without the help of children who long ago drifted from their lives. It's hard when you're older, said Ken Silva, 65, who has struggled with alcoholism and has not worked since he was fired in 2001 from a meatpacking job. I'm in this wheelchair. I had a seizure and was in a convalescent home for 2 months. I just ride the bus back and forth all night. The homeless in America are getting old. There were 306,000 people over 50 living on the streets in 2014. The most recent data available, a 20% jump since 2007, according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. They now make up 31% of the nation's homeless population. The demographic shift is mirrored by a noticeable but not as sharp increase among homeless people ages 18 through 30, many who entered the job market during the Great Recession. They make up 24% of the homeless population. Like baby boomers, these young people came of age during an economic downturn, confronting a tight housing and job market. Many of them are former foster children or runaways or were victims of abuse at home. But it is the emergence of an older homeless population that is creating daunting challenges for social service agencies and governments already struggling with the crisis of poverty. Baby boomers have health and vulnerability issues that are hard to tend to while living in the streets, said Alice Callaghan, an Episcopal priest who has spent 35 years working with the homeless in Los Angeles. Many older homeless people have been on the streets for almost a generation, analysts say, a legacy of the recessions of the late 70s and early 80s, federal housing cutbacks, and an epidemic of crack cocaine. They bring with them a complicated history that may include a journey from prison to mental health clinic to a rehabilitation center and back to the sidewalks. Some are more recent arrivals and have been forced at a time of life when some people their age are debating whether to retire to Arizona or to Florida to learn the ways of homelessness after losing jobs in the latest economic downturn. And there are some on a fixed income who cannot afford the rent in places like Los Angeles, which has a vacancy rate of less than 3%. Horace Along, age 60, said he could not afford a one-room apartment and lives in a tent on Crocker Street. Mr. Along, who divorced his wife and left New Orleans for Los Angeles 2 years ago, said he lost his wallet and all of his identification 2 weeks after he arrived and has not been able to find a job. It's the first time I've been on the streets, so I'm learning. There's nothing like Skid Row. Skid Row is another world. The problems with homelessness are hardly uniform across the country. The national homeless population declined by 2% between 2014 and 2015, according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Some communities, including Phoenix and Las Vegas, have declared outright victory in eliminating homelessness among veterans, a top goal of the White House. But homelessness is rising in big cities where gentrification is on the march and housing costs are rising, like Los Angeles, New York, Honolulu, and San Francisco. Los Angeles reported a 5.7% increase in its homeless population last year, the second year in a row it had recorded a jump. More than 20% of the nation's homeless lived in California last year, according to the housing agency. Across Southern California, the homeless live in tent encampments clustered on corners from Venice to the San Fernando Valley and in communities sprouting under highway overpasses or in the dry bed of Los Angeles River. The sleeping bags and piles of belongings line sidewalks on Santa Monica Boulevard. Along with these visible signs of homelessness comes complaints about aggressive panhandling, public urination, and disorderly conduct, as well as a rise in drug dealing and petty crimes. There is a sense out there that some communities are seeing a new visible homeless problem that they have not seen in many years, said Dennis Culhane, a professor of social policy at the University of Pennsylvania. Beleaguered officials in Los Angeles, Seattle, and Hawaii have declared states of emergency, rolling out measures to combat homelessness and pledging to increase spending on low-cost housing. Honolulu has imposed a prohibition on sitting or lying on the sidewalks in the neighborhood of Waikiki. San Francisco has cleared out some encampments only for them to sprout up in other parts of the city. Seattle has tried to create designated tent camps that are overseen by social service agencies.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Some news out of Washington. Edward Snowden performed a public service in launching a national debate about secret domestic surveillance programs. But he still should return to the U.S. to stand trial for espionage, former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder said Monday. The remarks were unusually conciliatory for a current or former government official. In 2013, as a National Security Agency contractor, Snowden leaked classified details of the U.S. government's warrantless surveillance of its citizens. And then he fled from the country. He now lives in Russia, facing U.S. charges that, if he returns, could land him in prison for up to 30 years. Holder, in a CNN podcast, said that Snowden, before revealing the secrets, had grown concerned that the domestic spying programs weren't providing a substantial return of useful intelligence. We can certainly argue about the way in which Snowden did what he did, but I think that he actually performed a public service by raising the debate we engaged in and by the changes that we made, said Holder, Attorney General from 2009 to 2015. Now, I would say doing what he did and the way he did it was inappropriate and illegal. Holder said Snowden's leaks harmed American interests abroad and put intelligence assets at risk. Now, Holder said, Snowden has got to make a decision. He's broken the law. In my view, he needs to get lawyers. Come on back and decide what he wants to do. Go to trial or try to cut a deal. Holden said Snowden should have to face consequences, including prison time. But in deciding what an appropriate sentence should be, he added, a judge could take into account the usefulness of having that national debate. Snowden has repeatedly said he would be willing to return to the United States if the federal government would provide him a fair trial. However, he has said that he is concerned that federal espionage laws would not allow him to present a whistleblower defense, to argue in court that he acted in the public interest. In a story from the Washington Post that is in the Omaha World Herald today, the killing of an endangered gorilla at the Cincinnati Zoo to rescue a boy who fell into its enclosure unleashed an outpouring of grief over the holiday weekend. Grief turned to fury as critics questioned the zoo's decision to shoot the 17-year-old gorilla named Harambe and called for the boy's parents to be punished for not supervising their child more closely. The Cincinnati Police Department said it had no plan to charge the child's parents. Online petitions called for legislation to impose legal consequences when an endangered animal is harmed or killed due to the negligence of visitors. The encounter occurred Saturday when the boy crawled through a fence and fell into the outdoor exhibit, where the gorilla seized him, said Thane Maynard, the zoo director. Witnesses told the Cincinnati Enquirer that the gorilla appeared to be protecting the boy at first, but seemed to grow rougher and more distressed amid shouts from onlookers. Zoo officials tried to quell the outrage with a statement detailing the decision to kill the gorilla. We are heartbroken about losing Harambe, but a child's life was in danger, and a quick decision had to be made by our dangerous animal response team, Maynard said. The first response was to call the gorilla out of the exhibit. In order, 2 female gorillas obeyed, but Harambe did not. Tranquilizing the 450-pound animal was not an option because the child was in imminent danger. This is very emotional, and people have expressed different feelings, Maynard said by email. Not everyone shares the same opinion, and that's okay. But we all share the love for animals. The boy was taken to a Cincinnati hospital and was released hours later. His parents, still unidentified, issued a statement Sunday that the boy was doing just fine and declined to comment further.
Well, this is from the Ask Well section of the New York Times. Should you fast before a cholesterol test? The question is, several years ago it was announced that there's no benefit in fasting before a cholesterol test. whatever happened as a result of that study, if anything. Current cholesterol testing guidelines in the United States stipulate that fasting before a cholesterol test is preferred, but repeated studies have found no clinically significant differences between results from cholesterol tests done on a full stomach and those done after fasting. Fasting will provide a more accurate assessment of triglyceride levels, another measure of heart risk, but it doesn't matter if you eat before a cholesterol test, if the main goal is to evaluate LDL and HDL cholesterol levels, said Dr. Mary Noreen Walsh, the president-elect of the American College of Cardiology. One of the barriers to getting cholesterol testing done is that patients arrive at the doctor's office not fasting, and then it isn't getting done, Dr. Walsh said. She runs the test even if patients have eaten before an appointment and encourage other doctors to do the same. Among the studies that found that fasting may have little impact on cholesterol blood test results was a 2012 Canadian study of more than 200,000 people that found average levels for HDL and total cholesterol varied less than 2%, regardless of whether people had eaten an hour earlier or fasted for 16 hours. LD cholesterol levels varied by less than 10%, whether patients had fasted or not. And triglyceride levels varied by less than 20%, the study found. Many European countries no longer recommend that patients fast before a cholesterol test. Non-fasting lipid testing has been standard in Denmark since 2009, and National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, which developed guidelines in Britain, have endorsed non-fasting lipid testing for the primary prevention of heart disease since 2014. More recently, a joint consensus statement by the European Atherosclerosis Society and European Federation of Clinical Chemistry and Laboratory Medicine reviewed the evidence and agreed that fasting is not routinely required for a lipid profile. Fasting is just one of those things that gets started and just carries on, said Boris G. Nordstad, the first author of the consensus document, which was published in the European Heart Journal. He noted that non-fasting triglycerides might be higher after someone eats fat, though not by much, and that the non-fasting sample would be more realistic, providing a better picture of what the average lipid levels in the patient are. Even eating high cholesterol foods like eggs or shrimp on the day of the cholesterol test, he said, would have little impact on the results. Cholesterol levels change extremely slowly in response to food intake. That is why it is so difficult to get cholesterol down by changing food habits, he said. Eliminating the need to fast just makes it easier for everybody, Dr. Nordstad said.
Interesting you read that. I have an appointment tomorrow morning, Steve, to go see my doctor, and I have to have lab work, and they did tell me to fast. So
I could eat a bunch of eggs tonight.
Maybe I'll print that copy and I'll bring it along. Say I didn't fast, and here's why. Steve told me I didn't have to. Okay, back to the Omaha World Herald. This is a story about, kind of a political story from the state of Nebraska. 13 state senators, including 5 Republicans, pushed back Monday against Governor Pete Ricketts' call that platform Republicans who will consistently support his positions be elected to the Nebraska legislature. In a public statement, the senators expressed concern that Ricketts was trying to add partisanship to Nebraska's officially nonpartisan legislature, and noted that the state's constitution calls for a separation of powers between the governor's office and the legislature. Governor Ricketts believes political party trumps principle, the state senators wrote. Our nonpartisan unicameral legislature has lasted for 80 years, and barring the will of the people for a new legislative experiment, we will not surrender our nonpartisan and constitutional duties. Ricketts had made his comments at the state Republican convention on May 14th. A spokesman for the governor provided a brief response. Governor Ricketts respects the separation of powers delineated in the Constitution. It is appropriate in a public forum for the governor or anyone else to point out the public votes cast by legislatures. The collective will of the voters is greater than the will of any elected official. The lawmakers in their statement quoted George Norris, the former U.S. Senator and founder of the state's nonpartisan unicameral legislature. Qualifications, not politics, should be the criteria for the public service. Today, his message is more important than ever, the senators wrote. We support the Nebraska Constitution and not any particular political party. They also said individually, we are Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, and Independents. Together, we are the singular Nebraska legislature, an institution which operates through collaboration and expertise to uphold its distinct powers and privileges to create laws and policies. The statement was released Monday on Memorial Day, but was written by committee over the past couple of weeks, expressing ideas all the senators could agree on. We want to make it abundantly clear that partisan politics does not work, Senator Har said. He said he would push back against a Democratic governor the same way. We believe in the importance of nonpartisanship, he said. The Washington way just doesn't work.
Got another article here on health. A low-salt diet may be bad for the heart. People with high blood pressure are often told to eat a low-sodium diet, but a diet that's too low in sodium may actually increase the risk for cardiovascular disease, a review of studies has found. Current guidelines recommend a daily maximum of 2.3 grams of sodium a day, the amount found in a teaspoon of salt for most people, and less for the older people or those with hypertension. Researchers reviewed 4 observational studies that included 133,118 people who were followed for an average of 4 years. The scientists took blood pressure readings and estimated sodium consumption by urinalysis. Among 69,559 people without hypertension, consuming more than 7 grams of sodium daily did not increase the risk for disease or death, but those who ate less than 3 grams had a 26% increased risk for death or cardiovascular events like heart disease and stroke, compared with those who consumed 4 to 5 grams a day. In people with high blood pressure, consuming more than 7 grams a day increased the risk by 23%, but consuming less than 3 grams increased the risk by 34% compared with those who ate 4 to 5 grams a day. The lead author, Andrew Mente, an epidemiologist at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, said that eating salt does not indeed lower blood pressure, but low sodium intake may be harmful, he added. It's important not to rely on blood pressure alone, but rather to look at actual clinical events, heart attack, stroke, and mortality.
All right. News out of Gretna, Nebraska. Gretna officials are fielding a slew of angry phone calls after some water and sewer customers were surprised to see their bills more than double this month. But everyone had plenty of notice about the rate hike, the mayor said. We've been totally honest from the start, Mayor Jim Timmerman said. The rate adjustment, which included a 117% rise in the minimum charge for sewer users outside the city, was a long time coming. Customers inside the city saw their charge increase about 25%. Sewer rates are determined by a base fee as well as a variable fee based on how much wastewater residents add to the sewer system. Water rates are calculated the same way, with the variable fee dependent on water use. Omaha is addressing a federal mandate to separate stormwater and wastewater by the year 2027. To pay for it, Omaha is charging its residents and other cities more for treating sewage at its wastewater treatment facility on the Missouri River. The Gretna sewer rates went up not only because of Omaha's charges, but also because of needed repairs to Gretna's sewer system. Water rates went up to pay for the water system's debt, which until now is financed by general operating utility bonds. Timmerman said the city did everything it could to get the message out about the new rates. The Gretna City Council approved the new rates at its April 19th meeting. And at the meeting before that, the City Council held a public hearing. No one showed up for the hearing, Timmerman said, and no one contacted City Council members or city offices. Engineers worked on the new rate structure for several months before settling on one. He also pointed out that the city's local newspapers, the Gretna Breeze, which is owned by the World Herald, and the Gretna Guide, published articles about the coming rate changes. But many Gretna residents were still surprised by the May bill. Timmerman acknowledged the hike could be a shock, but said it's what's needed to provide the service. A 3-bedroom house inside the city was charged $60 for water and sewer this month last year, but during the same period this year will rack up more than a $100 bill. We've got to look at the future and make sure that fund is there, Timmerman said. The sewer rate goes up each year because of Omaha's charges, said Jeff Coista, Gretna's city administrator. But the last increase in the water rate was 3 years ago. Other Sarpy County cities have already felt the pinch. Bellevue residents saw an average increase of $5 per month on their sewer bills in the last year. And in 2015, La Vista implemented a 10% increase each year for the next 5 years.
Why are Minneapolis and St. Paul so nice? Maybe it's the parks. If you live in Minneapolis, there's a 95% chance you live within a 10-minute walk to a park. That bragging right, plus a few others, make Minneapolis's park system the best of the 100 biggest cities in the country, beating out its next-door neighbor, St. Paul, for the top spot. Minneapolis earned this distinction by scoring 86.5 out of 100 on the 5th annual park score, a rank of urban park systems published by the Trust for Public Land, a nonprofit organization that works to protect natural land and create parks, often by working with cities to create new parks or improve existing ones. The scores rate cities, not including their large metropolitan areas, based on several criteria: the percentage of residents who live roughly a half mile or closer to a park, acreage and median size of the parks, and per capita spending on parks, among other factors. According to Adrian Benepi, the fund's director of city park development and the former New York City Parks Commissioner under Mayor Michael Bloomberg, more than 80% of Americans live in cities or in the urban shadows, and have access to parks directly affects a city's quality of life. Essentially, we believe you can't have a great city without great park system, Mr. Benepi said. The organization is working to get the nation's 100 biggest cities to commit to making a 10-minute walk to a park a reality for all residents. So far, 55 have made that pledge or promised better. He also said that parks help cities become more resilient and sustainable as communities and governments try to lighten the carbon footprints and prepare for climate change. Trees can reduce urban heat. Grasses can help absorb stormwater. Biking or walking trails reduce car and transportation traffic. And waterfront parks, especially those that include marshes or wetlands, can help reduce the risk of floods. Many of the cities with the 10 highest scores seem like no-brainers given their world-famous park system or culture of environmental awareness. Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Portland, Oregon, New York City, and Boston are all in the top 10. But there's also urban California, one of the country's largest planned cities, which made room early on for many community and neighborhood parks. Tied for 10th place with Madison, Wisconsin, was Cincinnati, which grew up as an industrial powerhouse in the 19th century and has parks that rival many of those of the older East Coast cities. It has more than 5,000 acres of parkland. Mr. Benepi said that a few trends emerged in this year's ranking based on the information on parks mostly collected by using a sophisticated mapping technology called GIS, or Geographic Information Systems. Most cities are using public-private partnerships to develop parks, he said, such as a Highline in New York City, which Friends of Highline, a nonprofit organization, maintains and operates for the city, and Campus Martius, a public space in downtown Detroit, which was completed in 2004. Mr. Benepi also said that spending on parks is slightly higher in cities that have been tracked by the Trust for Public Lands over the last few years. Since last year, New York City added about $12 in spending per person, bringing the total to $185.84 average over the last 3 years. Washington, D.C., the third highest scoring park system, spent the most at $286.63 per person. One of the criteria of the park score is how much the cities invest in facilities like basketball hoops, dog parks, or senior recreation centers. There's a huge surge in dog parks. They're growing faster than any other type of park, Mr. Benepi said. In the last year, off-leash dog parks in the 100 biggest cities have grown by 4%, according to the Trust for Public Land, to a total of 684. Over the last 5 years, they've grown more than 20%. The bottom 10 cities on the list, Fresno, California, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Mesa, Arizona, with Fort Wayne, Indiana coming in last place. But Mr. Benepi said that some of these cities lower down on the list are making the biggest effort to improve their systems. Mr. Benepi pointed to Houston, which has transformed the shores of its polluted Buffalo Bayou into a 160-acre park led by the Buffalo Bayou Partnership along a 2.3-mile stretch of waterway. It also added a connection by the way of bicycle paths and trails to the neighborhoods between two major thoroughfares, Memorial Drive and Allen Parkway.
All right. Out of Lincoln, road planners are considering Super 2 highways as a way to stretch Nebraska's highway dollars. The 2-lane highways have wider shoulders and an extra passing lane every 5 miles or so. Nebraska Roads Department engineers have said the design could increase traffic flow at less than half the price of a new 4-lane highway, about $1.5 million per mile instead of $4 million per mile. The goal is getting the most mileage out of about $1 billion in state road funding for new construction through the year 2033. Nebraska has far more transportation needs than dollars available, Department Director Kyle Sheenweiss said in an email this month to members of a state transportation advisory group. Instead of the stark choice of either upgrading a 2-lane road to a 4-lane highway or providing no improvement at all, sometimes a Super 2 highway could provide an intermediate improvement with better paved shoulders and passing lanes every 5 miles. The department hasn't said where Super 2s might be used. 4-lane highways are still planned for U.S. Highway 275 from Norfolk to Fremont and U.S. Highway 81 from York to Columbus, said Khalil Jabbar, the Roads Department's Deputy Director for Engineering. However, working drafts of the Panhandle's Heartland Expressway call for converting parts of U.S. Highway 385 into Super 2s from north of Alliance through Chadron and into South Dakota. The department plans to hold public meetings in July before deciding how it will prioritize new highway projects. Okay, Steve, it's going to get about that time where we should get into.
Well, I'll go ahead with the obituaries and from the, this will be from the Lincoln Journal-Star.
Very good.
Ann Tonette Andreas, age 90, of Lincoln. Funeral arrangements pending at Betheris, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home. Brower, Eileen L. Brower, 90, of Seward. Funeral service will be 10:30 a.m. Wednesday, June 1st at St. John Lutheran Church in Seward. Memorials to the St. John Lutheran School in Seward or Brower family to future designation. The Zapka Funeral Home in Seward will handle those arrangements. Beatty, Daniel Bruce Beatty, age 69. There will be no services, and there's no other information on him. Benham, Dale V. Benham, age 89, of Sun City, Arizona, formerly of North Platte and Omaha. Services will be at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, May 31st at the Adams and Swanson Chapel in North Platte. Brewers, Dorothy M. Brewers, 86, of Nebraska City. Funeral service for Dorothy will be held at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, June 1st at the First Evangelical Lutheran Church in Nebraska City. Memorials are suggested to the family. Flowers and condolences can be sent to Peterson Mortuary in Nebraska City. Denton, Lyle E. Denton, age 76, of Lincoln. He's a retired Master Sergeant in the Nebraska Air National Guard. Memorial services will be 10:30 a.m. Wednesday, June 1st at the Southview Christian Church. Memorial contributions may be made to the family for future designation. Roper and Sons will be handling that funeral. Eichmann, Ruth I. Eichmann of Lincoln. There's no more information on her. Franson, Ida Mae Neal Franson, age 90, former resident of North Platte. In lieu of flowers, memorials are suggested to the Sun Lakes Community Church in Sun Lakes, Arizona. Services will be at 1 p.m. on Thursday, June 2nd at Fort McPherson National Cemetery. Odeon Colonial Chapel will be handling those arrangements. I think it's pronounced Houghton, H-O-U-G-H-T-O-N. Houghton Fur Jr., age 73, of Lincoln. He was a veterinarian of the U.S. Marine Corps. Memorial services will be 3 p.m. Thursday, June 9th at Wyuka in Lincoln. Memorials in care of the family to be donated to the HUA and HHP in his honor. Gleisberg, Pauline Polly Gleisberg, age 92, of Seward. Services will be at 10:30 a.m. Tuesday at St. John Lutheran Church in Seward. Volk's Funeral Home will be handling the arrangements. Graziano, Mary E. Graziano, age 88, of Lincoln, formerly of New Hyde Park, New York. Services will be later in New York. Memorials to the Lincoln Food Bank backpack program. Roper and Sons will be handling that funeral. Grotman, Warren W. Grotman, age 91, of Lincoln. He was a veteran of the United States Army. Memorial services will be held 2 p.m. Saturday, May 28th at the Spirit of Hope Lutheran Church in Lincoln. A memorial has been established to the family's choice. These services have been entrusted to Griffiths Hovendock Chapel in Beatrice. Haig, Phyllis Lee Haig, age 81, of Lincoln. Mass of Christian burial will be 11 a.m. Monday at St. Joseph's Catholic Church. In lieu of flowers, memorials to St. Joseph Catholic Church or Juvenile Diabetes Foundation. Ruth Emerson Love Funeral Home will be handling that funeral. Forrest R. Helverson, age 97, of Syracuse. Funeral services will be 10:30 a.m. Tuesday, May 31st at St. John's UCC in Syracuse. Fusaman Allen Harvey Funeral Home in Syracuse will be handling his arrangements. Hamilton, Beth Little Hamilton, age 80, of Lincoln. Memorial services will be held at 2:30 p.m. Tuesday, May 31st at Westminster Presbyterian Church in Lincoln. Trump Funeral Homes in Lincoln will handle the arrangements. Hanson, Donald Nels Hanson of Tucson, Arizona. He was in the U.S. Army. Private graveside services at Wyuka Cemetery will be held at a later date. Hayes, Helen J. Hayes, age 95, of Lincoln, formerly of Beatrice. Memorial services will be 10:30 a.m. Thursday, June 2nd at Griffiths Hovendick Chapel in Beatrice. A memorial has been established to the family's choice with the funeral home in charge. Heckman, Dolores A. O'Brien Heckman, age 90. Mass of Christian burial will be 10 a.m. Wednesday, June 1st at St. Mary's Catholic Church. Butheris Mazer and Love Funeral Home will be handling the arrangements. Memorials to St. Mary's Church and School. Heinke, Virginia L. Heinke, age 75 of Lincoln. Services will be 11 a.m. Thursday, June 2nd, First Lutheran Church. Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home will be handling the arrangements, memorial, and care of the family. Hessen, Randy Paul Hessen, age 62 of York. Services will be held 2 p.m. Wednesday, Arbor Drive Community Church in York. Farmers and Son Funeral Home will be handling that funeral. Kendall, Phyllis C. Kendall, age 88 of Lincoln. Funeral services will be held 11 a.m. Wednesday, June 1st at Bethany Christian Church in Lincoln. Roper and Sons Funeral Home will be handling the arrangements. Memorials may be given to the Bethany Christian Church or the Alzheimer's Association. Korsakis, Cindy L. Korsakis, age 56 of Lincoln. There's no more information on her. Kugel, Joyce Jean Kugel, age 61. Memorial service will be 10 a.m. June 3rd at Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home in Lincoln. In lieu of flowers, memorials to family choice to be designated at a later date. Lechner, Gary A. Lechner, age 72 of Lincoln. Mass of Christian burial will be 11 a.m. Tuesday, 5:31 at Cathedral Risen Christ. Bertheus Mars Mazer Love Funeral Home will be handling the arrangements. Memorials to family for grandchildren's educational fund in lieu of flowers. Light, Jacqueline Jackie Annabelle Light, age 92 of Sunnyvale, California. She served 3 years as a corporal in the United States Marine Corps. Celebration of life will be held in fall of 2016. Condolences may be sent to aspenaftercare.com. Loiter, Margaret T. Loiter, age 98 of Lincoln. Celebration of Margaret's life will be 10 a.m. Thursday, June 2nd at Bertheris Mazer and Love Funeral Home. Memorials are suggested to Sacred Heart Catholic Church. Mayhew, Nola May Mayhew, age 88 of Lincoln, formerly of Beatrice. Funeral services are 1:30 Tuesday, May 31st at Fox Funeral Home of Beatrice. Memorials at the national can be given to the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. Fox Funeral Home will be handling those arrangements. McDaniel, William McDaniel, Lance William McDaniel, age 50. A memorial is being planned for a later date. McMullen, Elvira Marietta McMillan, age 96 of Hastings. Celebration of life will be at a later date. Livingston Butler Vollen Funeral Home will be handling the arrangements. Neil, Nan Elaine Neal, age 77, formerly of Sedalia, Missouri. Celebration of her life will be held at 1 p.m. June 2nd at St. Mark's Church. AspenAftercare.com would be a place to send condolences. Ninchhelzer, Merlin K. Ninchhelzer, age 90 of Auburn. Funeral will be 11 a.m. June 1st at Hemington Funeral Home in Auburn. Nielsen, Russell Harry Nielsen of Plattsmouth, age 91. There's no more information on him. Pogenpole, Robert Bob Pogenpole, age 88. He was drafted in the Army in 1945, served in the Philippines. Mass of Christian burial will be 10 a.m. Tuesday, May 31st at Christ the King Church in Omaha. Memorials to Alzheimer's Association of Christ the King Church. Arrangements by Heafy, Hoffman, Dworick, and Cutler. Radliff, Camelia E. Radliff, age 90 of York. Funeral services will be 2 p.m. Wednesday, June 1st at First Christian Church in York. Memorials may be directed to the church or to the family for later designation. Metz Mortuary in York will be handling the arrangements. Porsche, Carol Joyce Porsche, age 84. Memorial service will be held at 10:30 a.m. on Friday. Butheris Mazer at Love Funeral Home will be handling the arrangements. Memorial suggested to the COPD Foundation. Powers, Richard L. Powers, 76 of Palmyra. Funeral services will be held at 11 a.m. on June 2nd at Palmyra Presbyterian Church. Memorials are suggested to the Palmyra Presbyterian Church. Arrangements are Fusselman Allen Harvey Funeral Home. Pepe, Nancy K. Pepe, age 64 of Gresham. Memorial services is 10 a.m. Thursday at Metz Mortuary Chapel in York. For later designation. Rainforth, Pearl L. Allgood Rainforth, age 66. Her services will be held at 11 a.m. Wednesday, June 1st at Our Savior's Lutheran Church in Lincoln. Guide Mortuary in Nebraska City will be handling the arrangements. In lieu of flowers, family request donation to the Child Savings Institute. Roost, Aaron Roost, age 32 of Aurora. Funeral will be 10:30 a.m. Wednesday at St. Stephen's Catholic Church. Farmer and Son Funeral Home in Geneva will handle the arrangements. Thompson, Alice K. Thompson, 96 of Lincoln. Services will be 10:30 and Wednesday, June 1st at Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. Memorials in care of the family. Turner, Barbara Ann Turner, age 94 of Lincoln. She was a World War II wax veteran. Memorial service is 11 a.m. Wednesday, June 1st, at the First United Methodist Church. Roper and Sons will be handling that funeral. Memorials to the First United Methodist Church. West, Jerry D. West, age 51 of Lincoln. Memorial services will be Thursday, June 2nd at Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. Memorials to the funeral for future designation. Wright, Donald E. Wright, age 65 of Lincoln. Memorial gathering for family and friends, 5 to 7 p.m. Thursday, June 2nd at Roper and Sons Funeral Home. Memorials can be made to the Capital Humane Society, and that is the last one for Lincoln.
Very good. All right, Steve, thank you. I'll now read those notices that are in today's Omaha World Herald. First one is Behrens. Dennis D. Behrens, age 76 of Utan, Nebraska. The Reichmuth Funeral Home is in charge of arrangements. Memorials to the St. John's Lutheran Church in Utan, or the Nebraska Humane Society, or Region 5. Next one is Benitez, Joyce M. Benitez, age 73 of Omaha. No mortuary is listed. Bonnet, Jerome P. Bonnet Jr., age 51 of Omaha. Fifi Hoffman Doric Cutler in charge of arrangements. Memorials to the Bonnet Children Educational Fund, the ATO Fraternity, or the Morning Star Lutheran Church in Omaha. Davis, Betty W. Davis, age 72 of Omaha, the Brahman Mortuary in charge of arrangements. Earl, Bernard J. Earl, age 92. Johnny Gentleman Mortuaries in charge of arrangements. No other details given. Gherkin, Dolores M. Gherkin, age 83. Heafy Hoffman Doric Cutler in charge. No other details given. Grafless, Barbara Jane Grafless, age 82 of Omaha. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries in charge. Memorials to the Shriners Hospital or St. Jude's Children's Hospital. Hamblin, Tamara J. Hamblin, age 56 of Bellevue. Heafy Hoffman Doric Cutler in charge of arrangements. Memorials will be directed by the family. Harper, Charles Michael Harper, age 88 of Omaha. Johnny Gentleman Mortuaries in charge. Memorials are suggested to your favorite charity in Mike Harper's memory. Hogg, Robert John Hogg, age 79 of Papillion, Nebraska. The Kaler Dulce Mortuary in charge. Memorials to the Papillion Cemetery. Healy, Joanne M. Healy, age 85 of Omaha. Heafy Hoffman Doric Cutler in charge of arrangements. Memorials to the Servants of Mary, St. Robert Bellarmine Catholic Church, St. James Catholic Church, or the Hospice House. Henry Patrick E. Henry Jr., age 52 of Bellevue. Hefe Hoffman Dora Cutler in charge of arrangements. Memorials will be directed by the family or to Gideon's International. Lincoln, Stephen R. Lincoln, age 65, of Council Bluffs, Iowa. The Peterson Mortuary in Glenwood is in charge of arrangements. A memorial fund in Steve's name has been established. Miller, Bertha S. Miller, age 96, of Oakland, Nebraska. The Pellin Funeral Service in Oakland is in charge of arrangements. Memorials to the family to be designated at a later date. Moody, Iola E. Moody, age 72, of Omaha. Brahman Mortuary in charge of arrangements. Nielsen, Russell Nielsen, age 91, of Plattsmouth, Nebraska. Roby Funeral Home in Plattsmouth is in charge of arrangements. Memorials to the Plattsmouth Activities Complex for kids. O'Doherty, Dr. Coley P. O'Doherty, age 46. Johnny Gentleman Mortuaries in charge of arrangements. No other details given. Pogenpole, Robert P. Pogenpole, age 88, of Omaha. Hefe Hoffman Dora Cutler in charge. Ramirez, Deacon Joseph Ramirez, age 90. Hefe Hoffman Dora Cutler in charge. Roth, Patricia A. Roth, age 77, of Omaha. Hefe Hoffman Dora Cutler in charge. For memorials, the family prefers masses. Sabotsky, Edward Thomas Sabotsky, age 96, of Omaha. Johnny Gentleman Mortuaries in charge of arrangements. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be made to Creighton Prep High School or St. Margaret Mary Catholic Church. Welch, Roosevelt Welch Sr., age 82, of Omaha. Thomas Funeral Home in charge of arrangements. Wendell, Kirsten M. Wendell, age 45, of Omaha. The O'Leary Funeral Home in charge of arrangements. In lieu of flowers, donations can be made to the Kirsten Wendell Memorial Fund. Zendeljas, Rachel H. Zendeljas, age 76, of Omaha. Carisco Larkin Staskowitz Funeral Home in charge of arrangements. Zill, John M. Zill, age 48, Johnny Gentleman Mortuaries in charge of arrangements. No other details given. That concludes the notices in today's Omaha World Herald. As always, folks, listeners, memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and will go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska, 68152. And we thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter.
All right.
Well, we didn't do too bad there. I was with a gal one time, we ran over 10 minutes over. Well,
Sometimes it says, start at 10 till you, sometimes you got to start at 20 till.
yeah, I figured this one might put us over, but that's okay.
Yeah. I'm still kind of surprised that they, I asked Sybil about it one time, why we do it. She says, I don't believe.
The obituaries is what they listen to the most.
That's what she said. She says they get a lot of comments. You don't read them, but that's what they hear.
Yeah.
They like it.
Well, I mean, I have an app for my hometown newspaper. I always check obituaries too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a town of about 18,000 and the last names are all German, So, But there's a couple of classmates of mine that passed away this last year.
Oh. Yeah. Well, we're going to do editorials next. I know you won't have any.
Yeah,
If there's any
we've
left.
got some New York editorials here.
Yeah.
New York's outdated knife law. That's a good one.
All right. I'll just do these.
Yeah.
I'll do
And
like
this is one of the most popular parts too.
it is. Yeah. They like to hear
I write in
this.
once in a while.
Oh,
I
do
haven't
you?
written in recently.
Okay.
Yeah, if you write in too often, it won't put you in.
I guess. So if you want to start? Okay. And I'll do a couple of these letters, and then if you have another one too, you can do that, and then I'll finish up. And then we can go to today's living. Sounds fine.
Well, the part of the paper I have the most difficulty reading is sports. I can't pronounce any of the names. Plus, sports writers write books.
There's a
I never could. Even when I read, sometimes you'd read sports over here and recordings. Had a hell of a time reading.
Well, that brings us to the end of this break. I want you to remember that this is your Radio Talking Book Network, your hit information network, serving Nebraska and its neighboring states. The Radio Talking Book Network is brought to you with cooperation from KIOS-FM in Omaha and statewide through the NEP Radio Network. Well, since that brings us to the end of your break, it's time to head back to your live reading for you. So, I'm going to hand it on over to the two gentlemen, and they're going to get started on your live reading.
We're going to go ahead with the opinion pages from the New York Times. New York's outdated knife law. Across New York, a law-abiding citizen can walk into a sporting goods or a hardware store and buy a standard pocket-sized folding knife and be breaking the law. While exact numbers are not available, thousands of New Yorkers are arrested every year and charged with possessing a gravity knife, which the law defines as one that opens with the force of gravity or the application of centrifugal force. In other words, with a flick of the wrist. In 1958, state legislatures banned knives that had a blade that fell out of the handle when the pointer used it or pointed it at the ground and pushed a lever. The same law bans weapons like brass knuckles and kung fu stars. But the modern knives sold in countless stores bear little resemblance to the knives that were the original subjects of the ban. Many people, including carpenters, construction workers, and stagehands, have no idea that their knives can be made to open with a flick of a wrist, a skill many New York police officers have developed. Most don't know what simply possessing such a knife does break the law. Between 2000 and 2012, New York City police officers arrested 70,000 people for violating the weapons law, based on a 6-month sample reviewed by the Legal Aid Society, which represents indigent defendants. Gravity knives account for more than 2/3 of the arrests under the law. Most of these cases don't go to trial, but the arrest itself and the following entanglement with the justice system can wreak havoc on a person's life, especially a lower income person who can't afford to spend day after day returning to court. And while possession is a misdemeanor, it can become a felony if a person has a prior conviction, which could mean up to 7 years behind bars. In 2010, the Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance Jr. charged 14 retailers, including Home Depot, with selling illegal switchblade and gravity knives, and agreed not to prosecute them if they stopped selling the knives, handed over profits from the past knife sales, and financed a $900,000 public education program. 6 years later, less than $100,000 of that money has been spent, and the knives are as available as ever. Mr. Vance's office even granted an exception to Paragon Sports, a high-end sporting goods store that sells custom knives, because expensive knives supposedly aren't being used in crimes. But it's not clear that illegal, cheaper knives are being used that way anymore than legal ones. According to data collected by the Legal Aid Society in the second half of 2015, Mr. Vance's office prosecuted 254 of its clients charged with gravity knife possession. In only 4 cases was the defendant charged with intent to use a knife unlawfully. The state's Office of Court Administration has called for a change in the law, and a bill in Albany would exempt from the ban the sorts of knives that are widely available for sale, and that the average person would need both hands to open. This would help to reduce the number of unwarranted arrests without endangering public safety. A similar bill passed the Assembly last year, but failed in the Senate. There is no reason not to pass it this time.
Very good. I'm going to go now to the public pulse of the Omaha World Herald. We'll do some of the letters that are in today's public pulse. The first one's entitled Wind Energies, Pluses Outweigh Minuses. May 27th, public pulse writer Ron Beeman wrote that forms of renewable energy, such as wind power, visually blight the landscape. Does this mean we shouldn't invest in wind power? While I understand his argument, the reality is that any sort of human development destroys the natural landscape. Farms eliminate natural forests and grassland in favor of non-native crop species. Farmers often terrace their land or otherwise artificially alter the landscape for their own benefit. Grain silo and farmhouses also interrupt the countryside. And cities are no better, whether it's massive skyscrapers, multi-lane highways, or unsightly suburban and ex-urban sprawl. It all used to be undisturbed landscape at one time. I'm not condemning all human development. I'm pointing out that anything and everything we do has an impact on our natural environment. And wind farms in the middle of nowhere, while they can be unsightly and can injure or kill a relatively small number of birds and insects, are a drop in the bucket compared to what we've already done to our environment. Add in the potential carbon reduction, and they really aren't all that bad. This letter was written by Brandon Syracuse of Omaha. The next one's entitled Losing Sight of Its Mission. I am disappointed and confused by the plans for the Creighton University Medical Center. New owners want to turn the hospital into a 700-unit apartment building with a lake, with a beach and fountain, sports courts, and more. Saving actual lives is what the medical center does for a segment of the population that has the highest mortality and morbidity in Omaha. The new space will undoubtedly be unaffordable for the majority of the families who currently live in the neighborhood. The mission the Creighton family set for the school and medical center was education and health care for the poor where they work and live. Both institutions were to promote and nurture a fulfilling life for those without privilege. How does that fit into the new plans for the site? Northeast Omaha is losing its acute care facility. This area is federally recognized as medically underserved, represented disproportionately by minority, low-income, refugee, and homeless populations. I fail to see how this is a great day for these individuals. As the Creighton University president, the Reverend Daniel Hendrickson, put it, let us remind Creighton that healthcare for the poor is not just a global health problem, which Hendrickson and Creighton have recently embraced. They should embrace the healthcare and education of the poor in their own backyard, for which the legacy of the Creighton family was intended. That letter written by Rachel Dowd of Omaha.
Who bears the most risk from fracking? Say this for John Quigley. Until a few days ago, the state of Pennsylvania's top environmental officer, with a profanity-laced email that played a role in his resignation, he put the dangers of hydraulic fracking front and center in the public consciousness. Mr. Quigley had backed tough new updates and state rules governing drilling for natural gas. but after legislators voted them down, he blustered environmentalists for failing to support the cause. Where the expletive were you people yesterday, he wrote in an email on April 13th. The House and Senate hold Russian show trials on vital environmental issues, and there's no pushback at all from the environmental community. Nobody bothering to insert themselves in the news cycle. A few more expletives later, and Governor Tom Wolf reportedly began questioning whether Mr. Quigley could any longer be effective in his job. His voice could be missed. Natural gas is a big business in Pennsylvania, which sits on top of the Marcellus Shale, whose rich deposits have brought jobs and revenue to the state. More than 9,000 oil and gas wells have been drilled using hydraulic fracturing in Pennsylvania since 2005, the most any state on the eastern seaboard. The shale bonanza has also brought environmental headaches and raised concerns about whether the companies have disadvantaged poor people by drilling wells in low-income areas and exposing them to dust and traffic, as well as air and water pollution. In a letter last month, the Center for Coalfield Justice, the Pennsylvania chapter of the Sierra Club and the Clean Air Council, asked the state's Office of Environmental Justice to give the public more say in the permitting of wells. The groups believe the industry may be choosing drilling sites that disproportionately affect low-income and minority residents. The groups are asking the Environmental Justice Office, a unit of the department Mr. Quigley ran, the Department of Environmental Protection, to impose greater protections going forward. They also called for a retroactive analysis of past permits to determine whether low-income communities have borne the brunt of gas drilling. Pennsylvania is not the only state where fracking has raised such concerns. In California's Kern County, Latino and African American residents are disproportionately likely to live in high pollution areas near oil and gas wells. Environmental groups are fighting a county ordinance that could allow thousands of new wells without full environmental review. In the Eagle Ford shale field of southern Texas, a recent study found that sites for the disposal of fracking wastewater were disproportionately located in areas with high percentages of poor and minority residents. Many states have laws or policies that are supposed to ensure equal protection from environmental and health hazards, but not are all reliably enforced. And some states are striking down local laws passed by communities that don't want fracking. As for Pennsylvania, Mr. Wolf would be well advised to name a new environmental boss who shares Mr. Quigley's values, if not his penchant for ill-tempered emails.
All right, going back to the public pulse. The next letter is entitled Trump's Tax Secrecy. Why is Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump refusing to release his tax returns? What is he hiding? He will be the first nominee from either party in decades to refuse to release the forms. That invites suspicion. All we know is that in the last tax return he made public, 1981, he paid no taxes. Is he gaming the system or just cheating? According to Trump, it's none of our business. The nerve. That letter written by Peter Gadzinski of Omaha. Next one's entitled, Trump has the teeth to be president. We don't need a poodle for president. We need a pit bull. A pit bull to reverse Roe versus Wade, to nominate anti-abortion justices to the Supreme Court, to destroy the Islamic State, to stand up to the Chinese, Mexican, and Russian governments. We need Donald Trump. That letter written by Tom Ike of Omaha. Next one's entitled, No Longer the Party of Lincoln. The Republican Party likes to call itself the Party of Lincoln. Yet Republican leadership, including Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts and U.S. Senator Deb Fischer, has somehow forgotten about things like Trump being endorsed by David Duke, the former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard. It would seem to be an oxymoron to have the party of Lincoln joining hands with anyone acceptable to white supremacist groups. That letter written by Al Mum of Omaha. And the last letter in the public pulse is entitled Unsafe for Dogs. I am glad to see our community's response to the bountiful fresh produce and great food and crafts at our local farmers markets. But as a huge dog lover, I feel it necessary to mention that with so many people, strollers, and other obstacles, there is the potential for dogs to be stepped on, be run into, or suffer from heat stroke. Their owners are distracted by shopping, caring for children, and talking on cell phones, and may forget about their pet's well-being. On Mother's Day at a very crowded market, I witnessed a couple of incidents that could have ended badly for a few animals. As a dog lover, I'm thinking those dogs might have enjoyed walking or running in a much less crowded environment. And that letter written by Patty Roth of Omaha.
Music world bands together against YouTube seeking change to law. A few years ago, the biggest enemy of the music industry was Pandora Media. Then Spotify became the target. Now it's YouTube's turn. In recent months, the music world has been united to a rare degree in a public fight against YouTube, accusing the service of paying too little in royalties and asking for changes to a law that allows the company to operate the way it does. The battle highlights the need to capture every dollar as listeners' habits turn to streaming, as well as the industry's complicated relationship with YouTube. The dispute has played out in a drumbeat of industry reports, blog posts, and opinion columns. Stars like Katy Perry, Pharrell Williams, and Billy Joel have signed letters asking for changes to copyright laws. Irving Azov, the manager of artists like Eagles and Christine Aguilera, criticized YouTube in an interview and in a fiery speech around the Grammy Awards. Also, annual sales statistics were released showing that YouTube, despite its gigantic audience, produces less direct income for musicians than the niche market of vinyl record sales. This is the result of an explosion of views of music videos on YouTube against a backdrop of decline in the recorded music business in general. Larry Miller, an associate professor of music business at New York University's Steinhardt School, said of the fight, "With more than 1 billion users, including the youngest and most engaged music fans, YouTube has long been seen by the music business as a vital way to promote songs and hunt for the next star. At the same time, music executives grumble that it has never been a substantial source of revenue and is a vexing outlet for leaks of unauthorized material. It may not be a coincidence that the major record labels are also in the midst of renegotiating their licensing contracts with YouTube this year. In its newest effort, the music industry has asked the federal government to change the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, saying that the law, which was passed in 1998 and protects sites like YouTube that host copyrighted material posted by users, is outdated and makes removing unauthorized content too difficult. Carrie Sherman, the chief executive of the Recording Industry Association of America, says that even when songs are taken down, they can be easily uploaded again. There is a new form of piracy, he said. You don't have to go into a dark corner and sell stuff out of your car. You can do it in plain sight and rely on the DMCA to justify that what you're doing is perfectly legal. Europe's copyright protections are also under review, and last month, Andreas Ansip, the European Commission's digital chief, called on YouTube to pay more for its content. But so far, YouTube does not seem shaken. In an interview, Robert Kinsel, YouTube's chief business officer, said that since its inception in 2005, YouTube has paid $3 billion to the music industry around the world. In earlier statements, YouTube has said that Google, its parent company, paid that amount across all of its sites, but Mr. Kinsel now says that YouTube alone has contributed that sum and that other Google services had added even more. Music matters tremendously to us, Mr. Kinsel said. Artists matter to us. We are connecting artists and fans on our platforms. He also pointed to the site's new subscription plan, YouTube Red, and said YouTube's copyright protections were functioning as they should. Content ID, the site's proprietary system, lets copyright owners keep track of their material, and when the system detects a new video, including a track song, whether in full music video or just the background of a user uploaded clip, the owner can choose to keep the video online or take it down. According to YouTube, 98% of copyright claims on its system are now made through Content ID, and 99.5% of the claims related to music are handled automatically. YouTube says about half the money it pays in music royalties is related to user-generated videos that incorporate music processed through Content ID. We are working to create what has been the most significant revenue generator in the entertainment industry, Mr. Kinsel said, which is a dual revenue stream when you monetize all people, heavy users through subscription and light users through advertising. But the music world argues that YouTube's financial contributions have not kept pace with the popularity of its streams. In March, the Recording Industry Association annual report of sales statistics, usually a dry financial summary, criticized YouTube harshly. It said that free ad-supported sites like it, which let users pick specific songs on demand, paid $385 million to record labels in the United States, less than the $416 million collected from the sale of just 17 million vinyl records. Spotify paid $1.8 billion last year for music licensing and related costs, according to the company's annual returns, although the average royalty rates for its free tier are not much different from YouTube's by some estimates. The fight over Digital Millennium Copyright Act has touched a nerve. The music industry is bracing for what may be a high wattage lobbying battle reminiscent of the one over the Stop Online Piracy Act, a bill that was abandoned in 2012 after opposition from technology activists and internet giants like Google and Wikipedia. The copyright law gives safe harbor to internet service providers that host third-party material. While music groups criticize the law, some legal scholars and policy specialists say any change to it would need to be considered carefully, particularly to preserve protections like fair use. Anything that rewrites the DMCA isn't going to just affect YouTube, said James Grimmelman, a law professor at the University of Maryland. It's going to affect blogs. It's going to affect fan sites. It's going to affect places for game creators and documentarians and all kinds of others. In December, the United States Copyright Office asked for comments about the DMCA as part of a review of the law and filings by record companies to show how laborious copyright policing can be. Universal Music said that after Taylor Swift's album 1989 was released in late 2014, the company devoted a team of employees full-time to search for unauthorized copies. To the date, the company said it has sent 66,000 takedown notices to various sites about 1989, in addition to 114,000 blocks on YouTube made automatically through Content ID. Maria Schneider, a Grammy-winning jazz composer, said in an interview that the problem was particularly acute for independent acts like her who do not have Content ID accounts, and that the DMCA's takedown process discouraged lawful requests. YouTube says that about 8,000 companies and organizations have access to Content ID, that independents may get access through affiliated companies and industry groups. Mr. Kinsel said the steps in the takedown process were meant to ensure the accuracy of requests and defer false claims. Mr. Azoff said that after the Copyright Office made its request, he and other managers asked artists they represented where they wanted to sign a letter called for changes in the law. Not one artist declined, he said. But if there are creators who like their music on YouTube and SoundCloud, that's fine, Mr. Azoff said. The whole point is choice. Artists should be able to choose.
All right, very good. I'm going to switch and do some today's living and entertainment from the Omaha World Herald. This first one is a story out of Sioux City, Iowa. The pastor puts on a pair of brown leather work boots and goes out to the garden. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and the perennial onions are in bloom. The purple flowers are easy to pick out among the barren, raised garden beds that'll be tilled and ready for planting soon. For the second year, Cross Point Church is offering 20 free plots, each measuring 4 by 8 feet. Last week, there were just 4 left. The modern community garden movement has been slowly growing in the Sioux City area, with churches and organizations investing in local food systems, encouraging people to get active and cultivating healthier eating habits. Dan Bittinger, the boot-wearing pastor who doubles as the maintenance man in the community garden, already has his sights set on expanding during the next growing season. We can do this. We have 13 acres of land here at church. It's wide open, he said. We can provide an option for people on the west side who can garden or don't know how to garden to come and do this. Since the 1890s, Americans have turned to the soil to confront social problems such as economic recession, war, urban decline, and environmental injustice, according to the Smithsonian Gardens research. During World War I, gardening became a patriotic act. Responding to a food shortage in Europe, the National War Garden Commission encouraged citizens to sow the seeds of victory and raise their own vegetables. The campaign returned during World War II, and First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt planted a victory garden at the White House. An estimated 20 million families followed suit, reportedly providing over 40% of the country's fresh vegetables. Once the war ended, many community gardens were abandoned. Hobby gardening thrived in the 1950s, and guerrilla gardening took root in the 1970s when activists seed-bombed blighted areas in New York City. Community gardening is in vogue again and being backed by First Lady Michelle Obama's Let's Move program and the People's Garden Initiative, started by the U.S. Department of Agriculture in 2009. Both promote more community gardens to increase access to fresh, local food while combating obesity and malnutrition. Cross Point Church started its community garden to address the neighborhood's food insecurity, which was brought to light through interactions with students at Les Hills Elementary and residents of the income-based apartments across the street. A lot of people that we met didn't have fresh produce, Pastor Bittinger said, and they didn't have the space to garden. To help them get started, the church supplies seeds, tools, trellises, fertilizer, and water. Gardeners are responsible for maintaining and weeding their own plots, which are nestled between the parking lot and a grove of trees. A tall fence protects the produce from wandering deer and wild turkeys. Bittinger and his family have enjoyed the bounty of having a community garden. They live in a house on a hill where there's no room to plant vegetables. So last year, his family of 5 tended to 2 of the garden beds by the church. The kids love growing, but mostly eating fresh watermelon all summer long, he said. And his wife, who was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, got a taste of home by having fresh fried okra, squash, and tomatoes. While he rates his level of gardening experience at 4 out of 10, Bittinger assured there are other members of the congregation who are willing and able to educate black thumb beginners or urban agriculture.
Go back here to the New York Times, an article, Simon Cowell on joining Americans Got Talent. This is an interview. On Tuesday, Mr. Cowell, who acid-tongue criticism during the first 9 seasons of American Idol, helped him turn the program into a TV network phenomena, will return as judge on American competition show for the first time in 2.5 years when he replaces Howard Stern on NBC's America's Got Talent. The Got Talent format, which Mr. Cowell created and has sold around the world, is a summer stalwart for the network and is heading into its 11th season. In a wide-ranging interview at Mr. Cowell's home here, he reflected on why he gave up watching American Idol, how The Voice made him sick when it made its debut, and the mistakes that occurred during the brief three-season run of The X Factor on Fox. He also touched on his new idea for a competition show now that Idol is off the air, and shared his thoughts on the rise of Donald J. Trump. These are edited and condensed excerpts from the conversation. Question: What's it like being in the Got Talent chair versus X Factor or Idol? I was really confident until I sat in the chair, and you kind of go, oh God, this is a big show here. I'm used to being on big shows, but I'm thinking, I really hope this is going to work. And for about 10 seconds, I felt nervous. And then this 83-year-old woman, a leotard, came out and stood on her head and sang the national anthem. And I said, you know what? I'm home. And I never looked back. Why do you want to be on this show? I used to watch these sort of variety shows as a kid, and as much as I like being on a music show, it gets a bit tedious when it's just singer after singer after singer. On this show, and of course we get singers on here, it's a surprise factor where literally a box will appear on the stage and you don't know what's inside the box or what the act's going to be. As far as viewers in the United States are concerned, this is Act 3 for Simon Cowell. Do you think you still have something left to prove? Yeah, of course, particularly this year with the end of Idol, I've been reminded about it a lot. It takes me back to when I first launched the show. Being on a show that big, it's the best feeling in the world. I'm not going to lie. When we were doing big numbers, it was incredible. Do you watch Idol over the past couple of years? He shakes his head no. Why? I completely lost interest in it, to be honest with you. In your final years on Idol, where were you? Where was your head? I was just bored. I had done 9 seasons. The first 3 or 4 years were genuinely probably the best 3 or 4 years of my life. It was so much fun, so unexpected, we didn't know what was going to happen. The show just took off and became a huge hit, and we were in the middle of something that we were making up every week. Then it all started to get a bit serious, and Paula Abdul left, and then it just wasn't the same to me. Did you learn any lessons from the X Factor? I read a book once about Coke and Pepsi, and it was called The Other Guy Blinked, and we blinked. We thought 12 million viewers was bad. Now I'm thinking, Christ, if I could launch a show with 12 million today, I'd be a hero. But we beat ourselves up so much about it, and we changed so many things, the show became unrecognizable. I blame myself, but we made crazy decisions. We didn't treat it like a hit. We treated it as a failure. I wasn't aware the market had gone down to that level so quickly. I was in this la-la land headspace of 30 or 40 million, and I thought 12 million feels terrible. Do you watch The Voice? Not a lot, but when I first saw it, I got a pit in my stomach. No one took it that seriously, and I watched the first episode, and it was like being punched in the stomach. It was such a great idea, and those chairs, the panel is so good, you just go, they beat us to it. What's the state of competition shows these days? I wouldn't want to be launching anything with a gimmick right now. They tried that with Rising Star. Everyone thought, okay, to launch a new competition show now, we need to have either a spinning chair or a wall that goes up and down. It's not as simple as that. If you have a brand recognition and a network that supports the show and reinvests in the show, you get a real shot. But obviously, with Idol going, it leaves a hole in the market for something new, I think. We might have something. Another show, would it be a singing show? I'm not going to give too much away, but the idea is unique. If we do make it, it'll become clearer why it's a good idea. It's not a gimmick show. But you said you found singing shows a little tedious with that relentless parade of singers. I think they're too long. Idol was, 47 hours? That's 4, 5 months in the air. That's half the year. That's too long. The shows have become too long. We were making 1-hour shows, and even that was a struggle. We were making movies twice a week. They were just way too long. It's an effort to watch them. If we go back to where we were, maybe 25, 30 hours maximum, 1-hour shows, the audition shows are always going to be popular. People love auditions. And start it at the beginning of the year, never go into fall. Start in January, February. Got Talent works best. Works because we establish ourselves as a summer show. It feels like summer when it's on. You basically created the role of the blunt speaking judge on competition shows. A couple of years after you did it, Donald Trump did it on The Apprentice on NBC. When you see him campaigning, do you see a reality TV show judge? People are always drawn to people who speak bluntly. Whether you agree or disagree, you listen. You see the same thing with Bernie Sanders. The guy's in his early 70s, and every teenage kid is listening to him. I think Donald Trump understood that when you're on TV, you have a tremendous platform. We all recognized that years ago. We are all sitting there running record labels years ago thinking sales are going down. It's harder to break new artists, and then along comes this train. We all thought we'd better get on this quick. I always understood the significance, and still do now, the power of television. Nothing can compete with that.
All right. Well, back to the Omaha World Herald. I'm going to look at this day in history. So May 31st. On May 31st, 1790, President George Washington signed into law the first United States Copyright Act. In 1889, some 2,200 people in Johnstown, Pennsylvania perished when the South Fork Dam collapsed, sending 20 million tons of water rushing through the town. In 1961, South Africa became an independent republic as it withdrew from the British Commonwealth. 1962, former Nazi official Adolf Eichmann was hanged in Israel a few minutes before midnight for his role in the Holocaust. 1977, the Trans-Alaska oil pipeline, 3 years in the making, was completed. 1985, 88 people were killed, more than 1,000 injured when 41 tornadoes swept through parts of Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York, and Ontario, Canada during an 8-hour period. 1994, the United States announced it was no longer aiming long-range nuclear missiles at targets in the former Soviet Union. And on this day in history, May 31st, 2005, breaking a silence of 30 years, former FBI official W. Mark Felt stepped forward as Deep Throat, the secret Washington Post source during the Watergate scandal. We also have a whole list of celebrities celebrating birthdays today, one of which is actor-director Clint Eastwood, who's still very active. Any idea how old he might be, Steve?
80?
Gosh, 86 years old.
Really?
Yeah. Then you have singer Peter Yarrow from Peter, Paul, and Mary, 78 years old today. Football Hall of Famer Joe Willie Namath, 73 years old. Actor Tom Berenger has been in many movies, very in the popular movie Platoon. Anyway, he's 66 years old. Actress Brooke Shields, he's been around a long time too, 51. And actor Colin Farrell, age 40. And there's several others, a lot of them I don't recognize, but happy birthday to them.
We're going to go into some sports here. Perplexed over lack of power hitting, the Yankees seek answers. Starlin Castro spared the Yankees the ignominy of being a no-hit on Sunday, and his 2-run homer off Tampa Bay's Jake Odorizzi was enough to also spare the team from a defeat it could ill afford as it tried to climb its way back toward the top of the American League East. By counting on winning a game with one hit, something the Yankees had not done since 1914, seemed like an inevitable outgrowth of how they are swinging the bat this season. An offense that was among the most formidable in baseball last season, even with a late season slide, has sputtered from the start. After finishing last season second in the major leagues in runs scored, the bottom line for judging production, the Yankees this season are second to last in the American League and 25th overall averaging 3.88 runs per game through Sunday. The Yankees, who have been built around power hitting lineups and a dominating bullpen back end, have lost the pop in their bats. They were fourth in the majors in slugging percentage last year at .421. They have sunk to 27th this season at .377. They have fallen to tie with the Minnesota Twins for 19th from fourth in home runs and to last from 18th in doubles. And if the Yankees were so many older lumbering hitters in the lineup are now not driving the ball to gaps or over the walls, they have a hard time stringing hits together or manufacturing runs. It was more of the same Monday as the Yankees were beaten by Toronto 4-2, their only offense coming on a ninth inning home run by Brian McCann. This is a team that was second in runs scored behind Toronto, and Castro was a significant add. General Manager Brian Cashman said that we're radically different is a head scratcher. Asked why the power had largely disappeared, manager Joe Girardi said, "I wish I knew. You see some work every day, you like what they're doing, it just hasn't showed." The poster boys for the Yankees' troubles are the two anchors in the lineup, Alex Rodriguez and Marks Teixeira. Rodriguez returned Thursday after spending 3 weeks on the disabled list with a strained hamstring, but he is just 1 for 16 with 9 strikeouts since then. The one hit was a booming 441-foot home run. He is hitting .170 and was given Monday off. Teixeira, who has spent the last 5 days out of the lineup with a stiff neck, started at first base Monday, but his season has been even more troubling. He has not hit a home run in 37 games and 128 at-bats, the longest droughts of his 14-year career. Obviously, the two guys in the middle of the lineup, they were responsible for 65 to 70 home runs last year, Cashman said of Rodriguez and Teixeira, who have combined to hit 9, 16 fewer than on the same date last season. That tells most of the story, but not all of it. Other than Carlos Beltran, who led the Yankees with 12 home runs and an .827 on-base plus slugging percentage entering Monday, and Castro, who has been considered an upgrade at second base over Stephen Drew, few Yankees are matching their production from last season. McCann's OPS has dropped by .033. Chase Headley's has declined by .056. Brett Gardner's has dipped by .040, and Aaron Hicks is .219 lower than the fourth outfielder he replaced, Chris Young. Teixeira, though, said it was a hardly order that needed to do a greater share. That's a big part of it, he said. Me personally, I've got to drive in runs. It's something I've done my whole career, and that's what I want to keep doing. We have a lot of guys in this field that can hit for power. We just have to do it. The Yankees say their collective approach at the plate has not changed this year under the hitting coach Alan Cockrell, who was an understudy to Jeff Pentland, who was not retained after last season. Cockrell is the Yankees' third hitting coach in 3 seasons. We want to continue to stay aggressive on pitches we can handle in the zone and continue to be disciplined and take our walks, Cockrell said. That's what we preach. But there have been subtle influence from the analytics department, which has encouraged some players, including Headley, to be more aggressive early in the count. The Yankees have cut down on their strikeouts. They have the third fewest in baseball entering Monday's games, but have little to show for the extra contact. Headley said that the teams have begun to move outfielders around this year with great precision, as they've done in recent seasons with infield shifts. More hits have been taken away. He pointed to a dispute over the weekend involving the Dodgers and the Mets to show the lengths that teams will go. The Dodgers wanted to use markers in the Citi Field outfield to guide their outfielders on where to position themselves. The Mets refused to allow it and lodged a complaint with Major League Baseball. It's making it really hard to hit if you don't hit it out of the ballpark, Headley said. The Yankees lost the backup first baseman and outfielder Dustin Ackley, most likely for an extended period after magnetic resonance imaging test revealed that he had torn cartilage when he dislocated his right shoulder while diving back to first base on Sunday. The backup catcher, Austin Ramin, who has a surprisingly robust .810 on-base plus slugging percentage, will serve as the backup to Mark Teixeira for now. The utility player Rob Resensnyder has been called up to take Ackley's spot. The Yankees activated pitcher Luis Severino from the 15-day disabled list and sent him to Class AAA Scranton Wilkes-Barre.
All right, Steve, thank you. Hey, let's talk a little college baseball. The College World Series here in Omaha will be starting on June 18th, so just a couple of weeks away. But there's a lot of baseball to be played before that comes about. Yesterday, the NCAA announced the 64 college teams that qualify for the baseball tournament regionals. 64 teams all have a chance to get to the College World Series, which will be down to 8 teams when that comes about. And one of those 64 teams is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. There was some concern after they lost their 2 games in the Big Ten tournament here in Omaha that they wouldn't make it, but they were selected, and so they have a chance. Their first game will be this coming Friday, and it's going to be a challenge. They are going to be playing Oklahoma State in Clemson, South Carolina. Oklahoma State has a record of 36-20, virtually the same as Nebraska's record of 37-20. But the Oklahoma State Cowboys from the Big 12 Conference are the number 2 seed in that regional. Clemson is the number 1 seed. West Carolina is the number 4 seed, and they play Clemson also on Friday. Nebraska, obviously, then is the third seed. Other Big Ten teams that made it was Ohio State, who won the Big Ten tournament in Omaha. They are the number 2 seed and will be playing in Louisville against Wright State, which is the 3rd seed, and then also Minnesota, who won the Big Ten regular season title. They're the number 2 seed out in College Station, Texas, and they will play Wake Forest in their first game. So you have to root those teams on. Xavier is the only team from the Big East. They were the winners of the Big East tournament, beating Creighton, and they're the number 4 seed, and will be playing in Nashville against Vanderbilt, who's the number 1 seed. So that'll be a real challenge for them. Creighton, unfortunately, was not selected in the 64 teams, so a lot of baseball to be starting this Friday, and by the time June 18th gets here, we'll know which 8 teams have made it to the tournament here in Omaha. Some other news is that the never-ending NBA season is coming to a conclusion. The playoffs will be starting on Thursday night. And yesterday, Golden State came back. They were down in their best-of-7 series against Oklahoma City, 3-1, 3 games to 1. And Golden State, who had the best record in the NBA this season, won the next 3 games and beat Oklahoma State. So now they will be taking on the Cleveland Cavaliers starting Thursday night in the NBA Finals. So that should be some interesting basketball.
The rain wipes out the play at the French Open out of Paris. A miserable rain-soaked day provided the perfect platform for Guy Forget, the director of the French Open, to renew his campaign for a roof over Philippe Cartier Court. The weather, however, was not so good for the present tournament. All of Monday's scheduled matches at Roland Garros were washed away by the worst weather of what has been consistently wet event this year. The French Open is the only one of the 4 Grand Slam events without a roof over at least one court, and Monday's heavy rain and ensuing shift of schedule could affect tomorrow's outcome. The complete washout, the first at Roland Garros in 16 years, left the tournament in an awkward stance, with 6 of the 16 fourth-round matches having been completed Sunday and the remaining scheduled for completion Tuesday. The forecast on Tuesday also calls for rain. Tournament officials particularly want to avoid a jam of backlog matches that could force some players to play on consecutive days. That would be particularly challenging for men who played the best of 5 sets. Players need to play matches in 2 days, Forget said. I guess the guy who is most fit will win. With the women's final still scheduled for Saturday, whoever reaches the final from the top half of the draw, which includes the top seeds, Serena Williams and her sister Venus, as well as last year's semifinalist Timea Basinski and the Rome finalist Madison Keys, will have to play 4 matches in 5 days. 2 of the 4th round matches on the bottom half of the draw, Agnieszka Radwanowski versus, oh boy, this is a fun one, Svetlana Porodnikova, and Simona Halep versus Samantha Stasar, run finish Sunday. So whoever reaches the semifinal out of these 4 players will have less rest than their semifinal opponent, either Garbine Muguruza or Shelby Rogers. Forget said he was optimistic that these matches would be played Tuesday, and with the 2 days of matches on secondary courts, the tournament would get back on track. But he went out and ruled out the possibility of extending it into next Monday if rainy conditions persist.
All right. Going back to Major League Baseball, one of the hottest teams in the American League is the Kansas City Royals, who just 2 weeks ago were just barely at 500 in their wins and losses. They have since won 4 straight games, and in the last 10 games have a record of 8-2, and they're now in first place in the Central Division. The front-running Chicago White Sox have tumbled. They were leading the division since the season started, but they have lost 7 straight games, including 5 of 6 games to the Kansas City Royals in the last couple of weeks. So they just have really tumbled. Boston continues to lead the East Division, with Baltimore just a couple games behind them. Cleveland's 1.5 games behind Kansas City, and then the Texas Rangers are playing very well down in the West Division, and they now have a half-game lead over Seattle. In the National League, Washington continues to have a 1-game lead over the New York Mets. The Chicago Cubs has the best record in all of baseball and continues to play very well. They won their 6th game in a row yesterday. Now have the best record with 35 wins, 14 losses, and 6.5 game lead over Pittsburgh. And in the West, San Francisco is coming on strong. They have a 4.5 game lead over the Los Angeles Dodgers. So a lot of exciting baseball and a lot more to come there as well. But it's 8 o'clock, Steve. Time to say goodnight.
Yeah, good night. I hope it doesn't rain again tonight.
Yes. Good night, everyone. Have a great week.
Are you a baseball fan?
I am, yeah.
I kind of thought you might be.
Yeah, I'd like to follow it.
You know, when I was a kid, I was an avid. I used to collect baseball cards. I had all the teams in the American and in the National League. I think I had every one of the people memorized and what their batting averages were. And then, they expanded the league, and I started losing interest. And then I was a big Milwaukee Brave fan. They moved to Atlanta.
Yeah.
It just killed it. Of course, when Turner was showing Atlanta, I watched, and they weren't doing very well.
Right.
But kind of lost interest over the years.
Oh, did you?
I had some baseball cards in my collection.